pleasure to introduce our speaker for the month of May. We have, and many may have know her, we have Dr. Barbara Hernandez. She is the, let me make sure I get this right, the Vice President of Residential Services at Crittenden Services for Children and Families. It's a long title, but basically Dr. Hernandez has been working with children in this community for about 20 years, and she's going to give us a different perspective on a topic that we've talked about here at End Abuse many times, the trafficking and sexual exploitation of children, and hopefully she can give us the clinical side of that and how we can learn more about that topic today. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for having me. I don't really like to use this. I talk really loud. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah? Or do you want me to use it? No? You can hear me? All right. All right. So all of you have been trained in like CSEC 101. You kind of know who has not had like a foundation of commercial sexual child exploitation. So everybody's been trained. All right, so just so I can have an idea of how much I need to go into depth. The way I like to present is where we have an interaction. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please interject them. Just raise your hand so we can make this as interactive as possible. And so what I'm here today to talk about is more of the clinical implications now that you've learned the CSEC 101. And so just some ground rules. I do have a little bit of video. I do want to preface starting the presentation with there's vulgar language involved, and if you aren't ready to hear vulgar language, then maybe you're not ready to work with the CSEC population. I give a lot of examples. I change the names, but I think that it kind of it just makes the presentation a little bit more understandable. So I'll be presenting some of that. So I use vulgar language, so my apologies. So you guys know the definition of CSEC. We won't go into that. We know that it's a $32 million industry, and so we have quite, bless you, we have quite a few kids that are at risk. In general, we're looking at a pimp probably recruiting a girl within, and I'm going to use girl just for the sake of this presentation. We have girls that are being recruited within 48 hours of running away. So if you're talking or looking at a prevention model, really what we should be looking at is runaways. But if you really, really want to do prevention, we'll talk a little bit later about complex trauma and in childhood and infancy. So we're looking at 12 years being the average age of entry. In my experience at Crittenden, we're not looking at 12 simply because we don't really receive a lot of 12-year-olds. What we're looking at is about 16. And I know that even upon certain interviews, we'll find that at 16, they've already been on their second, third pimp. And so I don't know if it's been addressed with you or not, but the average life of expectancy once in the life is about 7 years. And that is simply related to lack of health care, STDs, multiple pregnancies, just the life and how draining it is, and being on the streets, and just the risk factors of being with Johns and multiple men. So we have a myth that boys aren't necessarily exploited. I don't have very many statistics on boys. I do have some statistics on the girls that come through Crittenden, but it certainly is happening to boys. Why do you all think, I mean, are you guys dealing with boys? Any of your facilities, agencies being exploited? No? Or how many of your agencies deal with girls being exploited? How many of you are catching the exploitation based on assessment? All right, so just to let you know, I did a 2-year, our organization collected data for 2 years, and our girls come through probation or DCFS. Right now we have probably 50-50 split. At one point we were getting girls that were identified as prostitutes by probation or DCFS. At some point they had been arrested for solicitation, so we had them pre-identified. Through assessment, we identified another 23%. So your assessment is really, really important, and we'll go into assessment a little bit later. Some of you have a couple handouts on there. I didn't bring that many, but they're on the table. That is a 3-hour presentation that I gave you. So this, I'm trying to condense it into 1 hour, and even that is condensed because I train up to 6 hours on this particular topic. So just, it won't flow with what I have here, but I figured you'd want more information. So it is happening to boys, but we're getting very little data on it. And the difference that we're seeing with boys and girls is that girls are more emotional about it. There's some level of connection with the pimp. And for boys, it's more survival. So the assessment is gonna look very different for a boy than a girl. We do different assessments for CSEC, and for girls, we have more of a pecking system. So if we ask very benign questions at the front end, like, do you have a boyfriend? How long have you been with that boyfriend? How many boyfriends have you had? So we're going more in that direction, and if anything gets pinpointed, we go into a further level, and then if anything's pinpointed there, we go into a really deep dive into a CSEC assessment. And so the girls are more into that, the relationship, the feelings, whereas the boys, it's more survival. What have you done to survive? What jobs have you had? It's very logical. The girls is very emotional. They're working off of very different sides of the brain. Case in point, I'm gonna show you a very small clip of a study. It was a case presentation, and I love to look for videos. So this is a very old video. It's of a professor in Houston, and he's describing a case study of a boy. So I can show you the difference between, you guys already know the girl part. So I want you to see the boy and the survival through his journey in CSEC. So I'm gonna show this real quick.
Tom, can you first give a case history? Just kind of a typical case history, and then we'll talk in greater detail about what happened.
All right, I can tell you the biography of a little kid from a hollow in West Virginia whose mom and dad went to Houston to find work. They thought that Houston was the capital of opportunity in America. The dad went out there to get a job, a low-level job with an oil company, brought the mother, then sent for little Jimmy and his little brother. Jimmy and his brother got to Houston on a Greyhound bus, and his dad and mom failed to pick him up.
How old were they?
Jimmy at that time was 12 and his little brother was 6. They spent the night in the terminal, Jimmy fending off the advances of a number of men. And then the dad came to pick him up the next morning. The parents had both gotten drunk and forgotten to pick up the kids. The boys went to live with their parents. The parents both had severe drinking problems. The dad lost his job. The mother got killed in a car wreck. The little boy was severely injured. Jimmy dropped out of school to try to hustle, was his word, money to help keep the family, what was left of it, together. The dad died choking in his own vomit after a drinking bout, and Jimmy was the sole support of himself and his little brother. The rent was coming round, and Jimmy had no money, and then a neighbor kid said to him, "You can get $10 just for watching me play with a man." And Jimmy said, "That's queer." And his friend said, "It's not queer if the guy does it to you. If you just let it happen and all you have to do is watch." Jimmy did it. Then the man offered Jimmy $25 to let the man play with Jimmy. And Jimmy took it, so he had $35. And then he got introduced into the routine. Jimmy was little, only 12, and he was small for his age. And the circuit he went on in Houston was not the main one, which is Montrose. He went to a place nearby, an arcade called Funland. The way that worked was the boys would stand by the machines, and a man would come by. If the man offered quarters, the boy would take them, and then the man and the boy would go off. Jimmy became a professional prostitute at the age of 12. He survived in that capacity until he was 14.
Was he working on his own, or was he part of an organization?
He was not part of an organization. He was what they call the Farm League. And he was taking care of his little brother. His brother got killed in a car wreck when he was driving with some people. And Jimmy then was desolate and almost destitute. He used the last money he had to bury his brother. He did not want to let his last surviving relative, his grandpa in West Virginia, know the way things had gone. A reporter in Houston last saw Jimmy across the street from Funland, and a man who used to pay boys for sex then told this reporter, "I know that boy." He told a man who's a friend of mine that one time he was having sex with that little boy, and then he realized that the boy was crying, and he looked up and saw that the boy was sucking his own thumb, and at that point he had to break off the encounter. The journalist believes that this reformed man who used to use boys was his own best friend, the boy who had been having sex with Jimmy. Jimmy disappeared. His body was later found mutilated, and his grandfather was notified. The police then told the grandpa in a very cruel way that the grandpa shouldn't try to get a loan from the city of Houston. It would cost $500
To ship the body back?
to ship the body to West Virginia because the boy was nothing but a harbor whore or worse. And the grandpa died shortly thereafter. The whole family is dead now. Jimmy was a typical kid. He wasn't looking for this life. He found it. He needed some means of support. He took what he could get, and he came to grief and met his death. Houston is possibly the worst.
All right. What are your thoughts? Talk about vicarious trauma, right? If you were a clinician trying to hear that story. I know there's a question back there.
It's a comment. I don't really hear stories about like families like so dysfunctional and so messed up like that really impacted me to like think that like it can happen to boys too. You just can't like put it in the go category because it's just like saying, hey, only boys can get jobs.
Right. And so for those clinicians, therapists, LCSWs out here, you can see that if I use a typical assessment, and a lot of us are using them right now to assess for human trafficking, they're more geared toward females. They're geared toward what relationships have you had? Do you owe anybody money? Have you had money? Have you had to pay money for sex? I think that in this sense, you're talking more about what have you done to survive? What jobs have you done? Because they're not seeing it as a relationship that has turned into a business. They're seeing it as I need to survive and I need to make money. This boy, if I would have assessed him at the first round, not when he got into actually having sex, but just watching sex, I would have never caught it. And the other thing, I don't know, I believe you had some presentations before about trafficking, is the verbiage that's being used. I missed it I was a foster care social worker years ago. And in hindsight now, I had a girl who met all the criteria for CSEC. Never in my wildest dreams did I even think to assess for it. She talked about a wifey the entire time. She had multiple AWOLs, promiscuous with men, and it was just a pattern. And never did I say, okay, let's pull out a human trafficking assessment and see what's going on. So being aware of that kind of stuff. And at Crittenton, that's the only way we find out about stuff sometimes. We'll find similar tattoos, we'll find similar verbiage. There has been bottom bitches at our facility, and so we start catching on to the verbiage. So what we do is we have a weekly kind of debriefing on campus because I'm finding that the recreation staff know that there are CSEC issues before a clinician. And how did I find that out? There's a girl with a tattoo on her face and she's branded, and the girls went to a pool. One girl's weave fell off in the pool, and she had the same branding on the back of her neck that we hadn't noticed. So rec finds that stuff out on the weekend. Well, the clinicians don't know. We keep going and doing our thing. So now we have debriefings to kind of compare notes, just 10-15 minutes to see what people hear, what they're seeing. So that's that's been very, very helpful for us. So a lot of clinicians and facilities have asked me, well, how is it that they just can't get out of the life? A lot of police officers, I've trained law enforcement, they just don't understand it's a prostitute. They just need to say no and leave and go with family or go with an aunt or somebody. So the way that I've been able to get through is to make a comparison or a cross-section between the sexual abuse cycle and the DV cycle and recruitment. The pimps are very, very sophisticated. So if you think of a pedophile sexual abuse cycle, we all know in this room that molesters tend to survey the area. I find the weakest kid, right? The one that I can make a connection with, the one who's looking down, the one who's alone at a park, the one who's at a restroom unattended. So they begin to lure the child. How many of you saw a video on Facebook where there was a guy at a park and he was telling the mom, I bet you I could get your kid to come and see my puppies? Did you see that video? And the mom's like, oh no, I talked to my kid about stranger danger, so go ahead. He's playing right there on the slide with a blue sweater. Sure enough, the man goes up and shows him a puppy, and the kid goes off with the man. And I mean, the mom's there, but it's the same concept. So they're luring the child, talking to her, getting to know her. I did an assessment once of a girl who was 16, and she was telling me that she was on her third pimp. She had told me that she had gotten in a fight with her family in Long Beach, very, very well-known family. Her brothers were football players at Jordan High School. So, I mean, she had a support system, but had gotten in a fight, was sitting at a bench at a bus stop. That pimp made a U-turn, her first pimp, and started talking to her. Why are you crying? I can't believe you're here. It looks like it's gonna rain. Let me get you some McDonald's. They ended up being boyfriend and girlfriend. That's how it started. So luring the child. So once they became boyfriend, girlfriend, you start with the grooming process. What does the grooming process entail?
Clothes, gifts.
Clothes, gifts. If you're a pedophile, what does that include?
Sex.
Grooming is more getting to know the child, getting to get them to be comfortable with you, getting to know their dynamics, their system, who their family is, when they come home, that kind of stuff. So for, go ahead.
I said their weaknesses.
Their weaknesses. Well, for them, it might be for the child, it may be their strengths. Well, my mom goes to work, she comes home at 12, she picks up my little brother at daycare at 2 o'clock. And so they start to groom the child. Then you have the sexual abuse. So perpetrator abuses the child. Eventually the perpetrator is like, I might get caught, I'll discard the child, go start surveying again at the park and see who I can find. So the abuse cycle is very similar to the recruitment cycle in that they monitor the area. Just like the girl at the bus stop, he knew how to survey and monitor. He knew who to go toward. He lured her, McDonald's, I'll take care of you. I can't believe that this is happening to you. He began to groom her. In this situation, he knew everything about her. He gathered a whole bunch of information about her and her family. He sexually exploits her and says, we need rent money, if you love me, you'll do this, it's just dancing, and then it turns into sex. And then he doesn't necessarily discard the child like a pedophile would. He discards her emotionally. She's now not my girlfriend, she's just part of my stable. And so she's still there. She thinks she has an emotional connection with him because her brain isn't developed enough. He knows that this is now a business. And so when she wants to leave, he uses the information that he got during the grooming process to threaten her. If you leave me, I will go slash your mom's throat when she's picking up your brother at the daycare at 2 o'clock. And so then you get into this kind of DV pattern right here. And it's hard to get out of the DV pattern. Now, in this case, the cycle of abuse and the DV pattern is also mimicking of recruitment. And so with DV, we know that we have a honeymoon period, lots of loving promises, loving acts. You also have the tension building. You're not doing things right, you're pissing me off. And then you have the explosion, you have the DV incident, and then it goes back to honeymoon cycle again. The same goes with recruitment. I'm in the honeymoon process, I'm making promises, loving acts, I'm gonna take care of you, I'm gonna support you, paint your nails, get you, shop for you. Then you have the tension building. If you do this, that means you love me, please. We need you to go do this or be with this crowd or whatnot. And then the exploitation occurs. And then you go back into the loving promises. Thank you so much. He's pocketing the money. And so when you talk to like law enforcement or you talk to people who really struggle with, well, they can just get out of, the life. Like, how come they can't get out? If you explain more of the domestic violence cycle and the pedophile cycle, we're so far along with those. Those are so ingrained in the back of our head that it's easier to kind of explain that dynamic and why we just can't have them get out of the life. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions? No? It's a quiet group. So this is a book that that we had one of our staff go look up, and it's called Rules of the Game. Have you guys seen this book before? Yes. Did Pratt, the officer, did he present this book to you guys? No? No?
I saw it through another agency, and I actually never got an opportunity to read it. I would have loved to have read it.
Well, it's about that thick, and
yeah.
I believe you're a professor, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a quick read. He's not that sophisticated.
No. The language is horrible.
So we had this staff go find this book. Where do you think he found this book in Barnes & Noble? What section?
Oh, probably mental health.
Probably like in like the
Sexual, mental health. He found this in self-help.
Really?
Yes. I'm going to show you some of the chapters that I found most disturbing. There's 48 chapters. It's probably a page each. So purse first, ask last. What do you think that chapter talks about?
Like, seeing is first, like sex.
Your money's first. If she's got an STD, if she's being beat up, who cares? It's money. It's all about money. Prey on the weak. Remember, I told you they know how to survey the area. A whole chapter on how to survey and figure out which girls are the weakest girls. When pimping begins, friendship ends. We talked about the exploitation and discarding the child. They don't discard them physically, like, okay, I don't need to see you anymore, you've already done me a favor. They discard them psychologically. That's what that chapter's about. Get you a bottom bitch. Why do they need a bottom bitch? Keep the girls in line. Train them. Let me skip ahead. A hoe without instruction is headed for self-destruction. There's a video that I show in the larger training that talks about an ex-owner of a strip club, and he would monitor even toilet paper use. So he'd say you can only use 3 squares of toilet paper. So he'd give the dancers, prostitutes, toilet paper, 4 squares, and then would train them to constantly ask them questions that were really micromanaging of their life down to the toilet paper. So when it was time for them to I'm tired of this, I don't want to leave, he would sit them down and say, how can you leave? You don't even know how much toilet paper to use. I have to tell you. When pimps had been arrested, or raided, or even some of the houses raided, they'll see books like Psychological Warfare, in their nightstands. And this is the kind of mental warfare that's going on. This is what they do to the girls to get them in line to where you're so confused, and you're in a DV cycle, and you're in a pedophile abuse cycle. It's very hard to get out. So play one hoe against the next. Why do you think?
I think that means girls buy into it or something. It's like the pimp probably says something trigger one of the women.
See their loyalty.
Then the other one's like, no, I'm better than you, and then they start like a fight, and then it gets into like a giant one. Like I think
A house divided.
the
right?
kid wants that because he wants things just like nothing should be like happy for them. It's always be like that.
Well, and it's 10 of them against one of him. It's easier to keep them very divided, yet at the same time, it's a very interesting dynamic because you have them all arguing and bickering against each other for random stuff, yet they're their best friends. They count on each other. It's all they know. How many of you have actually seen a pimp? How many of you think that the pimp is like Don Juan with the feathers and the pimp cup and the... No, right? So only one person has ever seen a pimp? You've seen him? What is the pimp that you've seen? What does he look like?
He was normal. What I did notice, he had that ring.
He has a ring, a pinky
I
ring.
mean, just too old to be around the youth that he was with.
Too old, yeah? Okay. I'm going to show you a video of pimps. How many of you remember Taxi Cab Confessions on HBO? You remember that show? For those of you who don't know that show, it was like one of the first reality shows on HBO. And it was random stuff, like it was these taxi cabs that were mounted with cameras, and people would get in and they'd record them. And usually it was funny, it was drunk people, it was just weird situations. And at the end of their taxi ride, they probably paid them, and they would sign a release to release the video. Well, these 4 pimps get in a cab and they video them and they sign the release to have it released. Some things that I noticed in this video is number 1, how they appear, how they look. 1 or 2 of them to me are very attractive. They're young, and what really stands out for me is how they talk about the girls, the language that they use, and really how sociopathic they are. I mean, they come off as really genuine and like nice guys when they get in the cab, and then you see what comes out of their mouth and you say, oh my God, this is a complete sociopath. He has no regard for human life. So I'm gonna show you this video real quick. You can get these videos on YouTube.
What do you want to grow with?
Say it one more time.
What do you want to grow with?
141?
Yeah. West Side Highway, the fastest way. Get that in 10 minutes. What are you guys up to? Nothing much, just clubbing. You ever been to 6 and 9s before?
No, can't say I have. What goes on down there?
Club. We ain't faggots enough, we don't think nothing like that. That's how you laughing at the phone, we all straight. I mean, that's how you laughing.
Well, you're in the wrong neighborhood then, man.
They look at us and stuff, but ain't no one touching us. I'm down here, it's mad beautiful ladies out here though.
So where are the ladies tonight? How come you're all going home together?
Home together.
Well, actually...
Well, I pimp in Brooklyn, so I got a lot of young girls for you if you want to come through and get some ass.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'll give you 30 minutes of pleasure instead of 10.
So you're pimp?
Yeah.
No, really?
I ain't gonna tell you no lie.
I only seen that shit in the movies, man.
They call me Breezy Jeezy.
Breezy Jeezy. Right on.
See this man right here? This dark skin dude right here? That's what they call him.
What's your name?
Crunch Easy.
Crunch Easy?
Yeah.
Right on.
About the man on the
You
right.
pimp too?
Nah. Just get them. You heard? He just get them.
So you recruit the girls and
Yeah, then he trains them.
and what does that entail?
But basically, he tell them about the game. That they gotta get this money, you feel me? That we all gonna get rich, but really, we all ain't gonna get rich. My team is gonna get rich, you feel me?
So how do you train a girl when she comes into
The training process goes, you know what I mean? First, a woman really has to know how to suck dick, you know what I mean? So she has to perform oral sex until I feel that she's ready to be on the strip. So you have to train her.
So how do you do that? How do you train her?
You see, I just let her suck my dick till I feel when she's ready. When you want to get your dick, so you don't want to feel teeth. You know what I mean? When you feel teeth, you feel that she's going to bite your shit. You want to feel pleasure. So she has to use most of her lips and her tongue action. So you have to teach her that.
You get to do these tricks whenever you want to? I mean, You getting the
It's a good assessment.
You taking advantage of the...
Trade on assessment for us, right?
I mean, are you getting it for free is what I'm saying.
I said, goodness gracious. Tell them how much girls you fucking date, Crunchy. You won't believe me.
How much, Crunchy? Come on.
No, Crunch Easy, remember, Crunch Easy. Crunch Easy. Well, a good 6 to 9 girls a day.
6 to 9 a day?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, I fuck them up and fuck them every night when we come home.
Every night?
Almost every night. I get my dick sucked every night.
So you good to your girls, though? Generally? Or?
Generally, we take care of them. They don't get what they want, they get what they need. Clothes, food. She doesn't get money in her hands. We do all that. We do all the paying.
You take care of what she wants and her needs?
Yeah, her needs.
And then
she wants.
Oh, okay.
All that wanting shit.
Oh, what she
You be a
needs.
broke pimp if you know what I mean, you buy your bitch what she wants. Be a broke pimp.
Okay.
And you always gotta keep an eye on them, you know what I mean? Just in case another pimp wanna come around, try to take them from you. You always gotta keep an eye on them. Put them in place too.
How do you do that? How do you put them in place?
You always gotta have that authority, you know what I mean? That they know that you the pimp, you know what I mean? That you're a daddy, that you supporting them. If you're working for us, and we're supporting you, we demand that respect, you know what I mean? Once you get out of line, that's when we check you. That's it.
So what was she trying to do, pocket? She was taking money from you?
Like when he had to really beat him, they listed like 300, and they never came out of pocket before, so. That was one of the worst beatings. Heated up the hanger with a lighter, heated it up. Tell him to stay there, and just put him on like that, you know what I mean? At least a little more. I don't do nothing like that. But they, you know what I mean, they understand where the fuck you coming from. I don't beat mine. You know, other pimps, they be beating them, making them cry. That's when they run to another daddy. Right there, Jim wanted to slick talk, and one of his girls left him. They came to me, to a real daddy, so now he's a little hurt by it, but I told him I'm gonna give her back after she get me a little money first, you know what I'm saying?
So why did this girl leave,
It was just the stupidest thing. Actually, Ray, you took it to heart, though. I don't know why. Boom. Another pimp was looking at her. She's not supposed to look the pimp directly in the eye. Once you do that, by code, you're in violation. That means you want the other guy. So she looked the other pimp in the eye. Ray seen it, and Ray posted on it. So she was like, oh, well, I wasn't really looking at him like that. I just wanted to see his face like somebody, you know. Ray, he wasn't going for the bullshit. He slapped her. She go crying at Jeezy. And then ever since then, she left with him. She's the one in violation. And she decides to go roll with Jeezy. Now that right there just fucks up your whole game, man. Gotta put these hoes in perspective, son. I'm telling you that hanger shit, burn that shit. Put it in pocket, cause she coming out of pocket. Burn that shit, son. You put that shit on her ass, son. She will be back under your wing, son. Trust.
What'd you learn from that video? Anything? Anything come up for you?
It's not a...
Right. I learned a lot of things, and I'll make it short. The men were very derogatory about women they use towards and stuff like that. It's like all like what they said is like if one of their women looks another in the eye, it's like they want to use a pin.
That's for any man. And so I'm glad you pointed that out. We had to have a whole training in our facility for men who worked in them. We had an uptick in incident reporting because the girls were being disrespectful, and then they call, hey, why aren't you, I'm talking to you, why are you walking away from me? And so I'm like, seriously, why are we having these incidences happen? Like, okay, she doesn't want to look at you. No, well, she's disrespecting me, and I'm trying to tell her what she needs to do, and da-da-da. So after assessing not just the incidents, but like what's going on with the male staff, who the girls were, I'm like, yeah, it's because that's a rule. That's a rule that they have to live by for years and years. And now you bring them into your facility or into your treatment, and you're putting them with a male therapist. Really? You're putting them in with male staff who work graveyard. Really? And so we had to have a whole training on, okay, this is the norm. It's okay. Say what you have to say. If she walks away, doesn't look at you, it's okay. who would have ever known that we had to have a training like that? Never in a million years. And so these are kind of the nuances that we're finding. They talked a lot about being in pocket and putting her back in pocket. That's the verbiage that's going on when you're working with this population. The burning, you should just burn her or hurt her. The other thing that I found very interesting was I had always imagined that a pimp would, like they're competitors. One gets mad at the other with this video and he goes to the other one and it's like, okay, I'll just give her back to you as soon as she makes me money. Like if he borrowed a sweater.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say what I find interesting about watching this is that the fact that they're very charming.
Yes.
And so you can see how other people would interact and not necessarily pick up on some of that really negative,
right,
sociopathic behavior. Because
right.
They're
very
good at
charming.
Being charming. And so you can see how they would be charming to the girls too at the beginning, why it would be so easy for them to kind of like pull somebody in.
Most definitely. And then they said, we don't give them what they want. We give them what they need. And that's definitely there. So we're seeing that. So just to go more into the complex trauma and an assessment and how to treat or intervene with this population. If you all are here thinking that I have like the magic answer, let's send people to pretend there's like there's no magic answer. I'll give you some interventions that you can use. And that will be helpful for you, whether you're doing private practice or you're doing it in a group setting at your facilities. And so that can help you a little bit, and how to get along, how to get by with treatment and how to kind of process this with this population. So the assessments that we're using right now, and although the county and the state are changing in terms of what assessments to use in general for child welfare, right now we're using a little bit of everything. So we specifically use a human trafficking addendum that's used by the federal government. That we've used historically in other programs because we have contracts with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and so we're already doing those trafficking assessments. Those kind of touch into sexual trafficking, a lot of labor trafficking, foreign trafficking, so they're not the best tools, but they do have really good questions. We also use the CANS, and that's a Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Assessment. The reason we use that one is it's more strength-based, so that works with males, finding out what your strengths are, resiliency, being able to provide for your family, being able to go and find work to be able to pay the bills or get money for your family. So it identifies strengths, and then at some point we're like, how is that a strength? How are they using that as a strength? The UCLA PTSD index we definitely use, and we'll talk a little bit later about complex trauma and how PTSD is as a diagnosis, and then you add times 1,000 for complex trauma. We use the Shared Hope domestic minor sex trafficking tool, obviously motivational interviewing, and then we also do the mental health initial assessment, which a lot of you are familiar with. I'm going to skip through some of this. We're going to go into intervention a bit. So one of the interventions that I can give you in working with this population is being able to get them to a calm brain state. If they're hyper alert, and they've been hyper alert since infancy because of complex trauma, their brain isn't regulated. They're in high alert, they're probably catching very bits and pieces of what you're saying or your interventions. So your interventions as clinicians, as case managers, mental health providers, they're great interventions, but for this population, they're catching only fractions of it. So I'm gonna go in later into how to use language and how to really get them grounded in order to be able to use your interventions more effectively. Just as a quick note, this is on your, for those of you who have handouts, we are finding an uptick in certain drug use in CSEC. They're the ones that are commonly used. We're finding high, obviously marijuana. We are finding high on methamphetamine. Why meth?
It's very addictive.
It's addictive, but that's not why they're using it. Why do you think they're using meth?
It keeps you up.
It's cheap and it keeps you high for a long time before you crash, so you're able to produce more. We also are finding a lot of synthetic marijuana. How many of you are familiar with synthetic marijuana? You really need to make yourself aware of that. So I can go buy it at the smoke shop across the street. Basically, the way I describe it, somebody mowed their lawn, put it on a table, sprayed it with a synthetic drug created by a scientist, and the purpose it serves is really for incense. The packages actually say not for human consumption, and you get high. And the reason that it is legal to do that is because it is an incense. And what happens is when the FDA says, oh my God, you can't use this anymore, the scientists go and switch one compound around. So now I have another one. So this is what it looks like on the packaging. It says not for human consumption. So it's called Spice, or K2 are some of the street words for it. You can now test for spice. The problem is with testing for spice is that when the compound changes, the test can't catch it anymore. So I mean, we're chasing a train, really. Bath salts, you all know, have heard probably of bath salts. You can also buy them at the smoke shop. That one guy in the news did a lot of this and he ate his neighbor's face. Remember that? So a hallucinogen, you become very paranoid. You have panic attacks, insomnia, agitation, dizziness. So you can see how some of this can really manifest itself in a really bad way. Bath salts kind of look like this. They also say not for human consumption. So trauma, psychologically wounding experience that induces powerlessness, fear, recurrent hopelessness, and a constant state of alert. Constant state of alert. Now, if I am in an accident, a car accident, and I suffer from PTSD, that's one incident, PTSD, I'm constantly in a hyper alert state. I won't get in a car. Every time I'm crossing the street, my alertness goes up, my anxiety goes up. Now, if I have been having traumatic, post-traumatic now, but if I have had traumatic events from infancy all the way through adolescence at the hands of a caretaker, molestation, neglect, abandonment, abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, over and over and over and over, it's PTSD times 1,000. And it's at the hands of a caretaker, which makes it 10 times worse. So what we're looking at in youth, in this population, is 99.9% of them, I think the statistics are 70 to 90% have had sexual molestation. In my experience, 99.9 have experienced molestation, and 99.9 of them have had complex trauma. So when we talk about developmental or complex trauma, we're talking about chronic early maltreatment, occurs at the caregiver's hands. It's PTSD, multiplied times 100, like I mentioned. It's a clinical construct. It's not a DSM diagnosis. So if they come in, I can't even diagnose them with complex trauma. I have to defer to PTSD. So what we're looking at when you have complex trauma is, look at the brain development here. So you have the abused brain on that far side, and you have a healthy brain on this side. All right? So how does this happen? If I'm having abuse for prolonged periods of time, my cortisol level, which is the flight or fight hormone, goes way up. That's what's going to happen to me if somebody's chasing me down the street, right? To kill me. It's going to go up. But if that person stops chasing me, my cortisol level at some point goes down. If I'm in a dark alley after that, it goes up, but then it's able to go down. For kids who go through abuse over and over and over and over and over, it stays up, it never comes down. And guess what? When you all get them in your facilities, or when you encounter them, do you think it's down? It's normal now. It's heightened. And what happens with excessive cortisol levels being so high all the time is the myelin sheath, which is the jelly part of your brain, doesn't develop. The myelin sheath lets those messages slide back and forth from emotional to logical. okay, like a kangaroo. It lets the brain synapse. So let me backtrack a bit. We all know that our brain doesn't develop for females till 21, males to about 24. This is already happening. We don't have, girls work off of the emotional brain, boys work off of the logical brain. So we already have that. So now you have complex trauma, double whammy, because now it's going to be even harder to get the messages across. So let me now tell you, if I have a pimp approach me, and I have that brain over there, and my brain's not developed enough because I'm 16, when he comes to me and says, oh, Barbara, I'll take care of you. I don't know why your mom, threw you out of the house. I'll go buy you food. I'll take care of you. I'm your boyfriend. What part of the brain am I working on? I'm a girl. The emotional side of the brain. And the logical has probably a split second to send over the message saying, this is weird. This does not seem right. How many of you have been approached by somebody and you're like, yeah, I'll just go that way, right? Because your emotional brain says, oh, maybe I can make a friend. And then your logical side says, oh, heck no, you better go in the other direction, right? They don't have that movement. It's not, the jelly's not making it go the other direction. It's slow, it's like a turtle. The myelin isn't there. In addition to that, I'm a female. I work off the right side of the brain, and I'm 16. It's not fused yet. So when you're looking at this scenario and having the pimp approach you, I have a split second to make a decision, and they don't have the capability organically to make that decision. They need more time. Whereas I'm going in that direction. They're sitting there going, and the pimp goes at it and at it and at it, and boom, I'm there. I'm working completely off the emotional side of the brain.
Yeah, in the brain scan that you were showing earlier, it looks like the damaged brain, the only part that is more highly developed appears to be the occipital lobe, but the part that would process that information
would be the frontal.
Be the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe.
Right.
Not even see the limbic system in the right. The one on the left seems to be normal, but the visual cortex, maybe that's what assessment? I don't know. But that's the only part that looks like it's actually higher developed.
Right. This is very little on my screen.
Right?
Yeah.
The frontal lobe on the left is well developed, frontal lobe on the right comes missing.
Right. Yeah.
So you get the information, but you can't process it.
No, it's not processing. And so I had shown a picture here of the myelin throughout the brain, whether it's frontal, occipital. So, but I took it off of this presentation, where you kind of see the difference between the healthy cells that are completely coated in myelin and the ones that are not. Myelin, I'm not a physician, so I've heard that you can regenerate it, but if that flight or fight hormone is elevated, you're now at 16 years old, it's still elevated. And how do you see that it's elevated? By their triggers. We had one girl who we didn't know why she was triggered all the time. A clicking of heels on the ground. Who would have ever known? She said her pimp used to make her wear heels on the strip, on the blade. And so every time she heard a staff with heels, she's like, oh, you fucking take off your heels. What the fuck are you And I mean, it would turn into like, oh my God, we're gonna have to restrain her. So what we do now is when we have girls come in, we'll say, what are your triggers? We want to know what their triggers are and what their coping skills are. So if heels are your triggers, we'll probably have a debriefing with staff and say, okay, everybody wear flip-flops or wear tennis shoes. I mean, this is how silly you think. You think that you don't have to mention these things. Who would have ever known? One girl the other day, God, what did she say her trigger was? And I just was astonished. She's very aggressive. And when you tell her, I would have never known, she's a bottom bitch. When you tell her, and she's very pregnant, very aggressive. And when you tell her, when she starts getting escalated, people will usually say, "You're pregnant, calm yourself down." That's a trigger for her. I fucking know I'm pregnant. The pimp is the dad. And so I don't know what it brings up for her. So now, debriefing with staff, do not say she's pregnant. Do not say that she's putting her, herself in danger because her blood pressure is going up or whatever. Use other tools to be able to intervene. So you have to know what their triggers are and what calms them down. And they write it out for us. We're like, here's your ICMP, please write out what your triggers are, and let's talk about what interventions I could use that aren't going to trigger you. So when you find that you have complex trauma, we're looking at all domains are impaired. Attachment, mood regulation, that's what we kind of see all the time. Cognition, the inability to process, it's taking a long time to process information, and their self-concept. So with trauma and treatment, so let's say now you have a child, regular child who's had a traumatic experience. They're at baseline, they've had trauma, they have an intense emotional response. And we all know that we're adults, our brains are fully developed, that we can tolerate the trauma, most times. We can tolerate the trauma and the feelings of the trauma, the emotions of it together. And that's how, as you know, when I go into therapy, my therapist is gonna help me process those together. What happened? What were the feelings associated with them? I call it plugging it in. So we as clinicians help plug it in. The more we plug it in, you're now doing trauma-focused treatment. So you integrate the trauma with the emotion and you go back to baseline, hopefully. Most of these kids have not had treatment. So you have the trauma with intense emotional response 20 billion times, and you have the disassociation of the trauma and the emotional event, the trauma and the emotion, and when we don't connect them, they just go through the motions again and again and again because they can't associate the emotion with the event. So when a pimp approaches me and I'm asked to go sleep with 3 guys, it's normal. I'm not attaching the emotion that went with it to say this is not right. The brain's not doing this with emotion and the event. And so you have a repetition of events with decreased emotional intensity or reactivity, and so it puts you at high risk for CSEC. So interventions, working with a calm brain state. How do you get to a calm brain state? How do you get them to calm the brain down to be able to intervene? So I'm going to give you an example. When I was at a Olympics, we had a little Olympics with the girls, and I was sitting with a staff. We were taking a break, and there was a girl behind us. She was a very, very pretty girl. She was a CSEC youth, but she never worked the streets. She made a lot of money. And she was very young. She was 17 at the time of this event. And so I was sitting talking to a staff about the Lady Gaga concert and how the tickets were $250. And we bantered back and forth about that. And she says to me, "Barbara, you're so fucking stupid." And I turn around, all my staff's there. I'm like, oh God, now what did I do? So I turn around and I say, "Why am I stupid?" And she goes, "What you fucking stupid girls earn in 40 hours, I can earn in 5 minutes. She's right, she could. And so what do you think I deferred to? How did you think how would you handle that situation? How about over here? You guys are the quiet group over here. How would you handle a girl saying that to you? What would you say back? My work isn't dangerous. I have a 401k. I find value in my job. I love you girls. I'm dedicating my life. It's my free ticket to heaven. What do you say?
What I would say is, at least you're safe, and then I'd walk away.
All right, so I'm going to talk about me. Yeah, basically, right? Well, guess what I said? I find value in my job. I love coming to Crittenton and work. I love working with you guys. You guys are safe here. I want to do this forever. Find a career. Let's get you, so you don't have to do. That was a bunch of bullshit. She wasn't going to listen to me. She makes a lot of money. And she said, "Go fuck yourself," and she walked off. She had every right to say that to me because I wasn't with her. That was her story and her journey to tell, whether it was at a park. I don't know if it would have been the right time, But it was her journey it was her book. It was her book to write, not mine. And so in order to get her to a calm brain state, say you were in a private practice or in a room or at your facility where you do have the opportunity to talk, and she does say that to you, to get her to a calm brain state is say, you're right, have you ever been to a concert? You, not me. Have you ever been to a concert? Yeah, I went to the Madonna concert. Who took you? I made money and I went, and my pimp took me, or my boyfriend took me. Okay, and how'd that go? Oh, we had such a great time. Then after that, we went to the Hilton and he rented a room. And how did that go? We had a party. And how did that go? I ended up in a room with a couple guys. And how did that go? I got raped that night. And how'd that go? That's not what I say, but you get what I'm trying to tell you, right? I have to let the record play. And that's the intervention that is the key. If you wanted an intervention to take with you, let the record play. I was putting it on pause to talk about a 401k, really. And so the more you let the record play, and us as therapists, as clinicians, as case managers, as directors, we love to intervene. We love to apply intervention. For goodness sakes, we have books on interventions. What to intervene when they're depressed, how to intervene when they're anxious. We do a treatment plan with interventions. We love to intervene. This isn't about intervention anymore. Your intervention is let the record play. Because I can guarantee you when you're going to see results is when she finally gets to the story about her first exploitation. That's the only time. Everything else is just chump change. So let the record play, avoid re-triggering stress responses to get to the calm brain state. Because what's happening in the calm brain state is then that you have the logical, finally having the opportunity and the time to go and correct the emotional. There's a lot of trauma-focused best practices, evidence-based practices that are being applied right now in different facilities. I don't know if you guys use them for those DMH people in the room. It's kind of mandated. We specifically use Seeking Safety because it's trauma-based and it works with those who have substance use. And so we find that it's a comorbid disorder that we're working with, so it's the best one for us. Seeking Safety isn't that friendly though to CSEC. So we had to modify, not the content of CSEC, so those DMH people, like cover your ears, but whenever it says trauma, wherever I could, it was exploitation, not just trauma. So we kind of like modified the words a little bit to be able to engage them with Seeking Safety and address the exploitation specifically. But there's trauma-focused CBT, there's some other ones. So typically in this training, I kind of just go over them. The reason also that we use Seeking Safety is it's 13 and up, so you can use it for younger children. Is Seeking Safety my favorite? No, I wouldn't use it at all if it were up to me. We run a group facility, so to run groups every day and to how many of you run Seeking Safety? You have to check in every day. In every group, you have to check in and check out. And so the girls are like, oh, I'm tired of checking in. I'm fucking tired of checking in. And you're like, okay, don't check in. Check out. Obstacles to treatment. So we have the Stockholm Syndrome, the trauma bonds. All the girls want to go back to their pimp. Every single one of them. That bottom bitch came in that first day. She went for a stress walk, took another girl with her. And they went for a stress walk of the pimp. Now, mind you, she came from a long distance. She came from Northern California. 2 days after she came here, I thought it was a day, but I think it was 2 days, she went for a stress walk with another girl. That pimp had left her a phone at the park. That pimp followed her all the way to Southern California. And so they have these trauma bonds with them. And so what we've seen is that these girls will AWOL somewhere between 6 to 10 times before actually wanting or contemplating treatment. And that comes with the territory. And so I know for some of you who work in facilities and have like group homes or whatnot, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow because you're being monitored for AWOLs, you know? You have CQI measures to not have so many AWOLs. Well, guess what? You might want to talk to your quality assurance person because your AWOLs are going to go up. And it comes with the territory.
So would that be one of those things where you might look back at a client and think AWOLing all the time? Would you relate?
AWOLing, promiscuous, older boyfriends, talking about a wifey, triggers, so not looking guys in the eye. So, I mean, it's a whole bunch of things that you could even just visually see. Yeah.
What's the wifey term?
Wifey, okay, so all of them are in a, so you have the pimp or madam. He has a stable, that's what he names it. A stable of 6 to 10 girls, 5 to 10 girls. Mind you, he has about 6 girls, and and they all have quotas. So if they have a quota of $1,000 each, that pimp is making probably about $2 million untaxed per year. That's a lot of money. It's 2.1 million to be exact if you have about 6 girls, and that's if the quota is 1,000. So,
Did you say a day? 1,000 a day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So wifey is what they call each other within that stable. That's a very, wifey, bottom bitch, I mean, those are very key terms. I miss that wifey one. I'm like, why do you keep calling your best friend a wifey? She's like, she's just my wifey. Weird stuff. That was 15, 17 years ago.
So it's the label for all the other prostitutes in the group. Okay.
And there's other terms, but I mean, they change as we go, but that's the common one.
So are you saying also that these young people are living at home, but leaving it at night to do this work for the pimps? Because that's one of my greatest fears, is that because parents are not supervising their children and they're telling us, well, they're coming in until 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning and they're 14 years old. It's like, what is that about? So is that something?
Restrain her on the street unless she's going to throw herself off a bridge. And so, you know, I think that there's those dynamics. Like a parent, we're out of resources in this room. I don't even know what a parent could do, because if she's going out in the street because she's being forced or because they're telling her mom's going to be killed, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to jump out a friggin' window too. So where does it come where it's like the supervision thing versus I have to do it because everybody's going to get killed kind of thing? And so, you know, there's a lot of movements to decriminalize it. I get it. If I had to speak to you personally from my household without Crittenton, without being a presenter here, I would tell you that if my little girl, I don't have one, but or boy, was possibly being prostituted, I would plant drugs in her pocket and I'd say arrest her. Because the only way to get mental health treatment right now is mandated through DCFS or probation. Because if your girl's being prostituted, nobody's going to mandate her to go to therapy. No, the pimp isn't.
Unless they're in foster care, though.
Foster care, probation. What else? Who else is going to mandate you to go to therapy? Nobody. A school isn't. Your parents can try. But I'd have my kid arrested. And so that's the dilemma. I know there's also a lot of movements to decriminalize, and so if you're being caught for solicitation, even in Long Beach right now, there's an active movement that if I get a girl on the street, law enforcement picks her up, she's being caught for solicitation, what they do is they don't charge her, they treat her as a victim, totally get it, okay, totally get it. But what do? How many of you know what's going on in Long Beach? They find a shelter, reunite with family. They put a worker on you for 72 hours to give you resources, food, clothing, shelter, whatever resources you need. That advocate is there for you for 72 hours. That is great, but your dad's the pimp. How's that working out? There's no mandate for services and to deal with everything and all the clinical constructs that we're talking about today, because that's not just going to go away, right?
That's actually my question. Is I'm working with a lot of adults where their dad or stepdad was the pimp.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this, suburban, the ones I'm working with, white folks who the one dad in the neighborhood is pimping their daughter, the sisters, and some of their friends. And when I'm seeing them as adults, but are you seeing that when it's the dad or stepdad, and what's being done in those situations? I'm seeing many more folks who are, the ones that are being caught are the folks who are out there, recruiting, and it's not their family.
Well, the nicety of it all is that in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of movements made with the state of California to report against family members. Back in the day, 5 years ago, back in the day, you couldn't even report to the child abuse hotline. They didn't have a mechanism to take a report for child sexual exploitation. They're like, well, it's not abuse occurring in the home. I'm like, okay, well, it's not in the home, but it's at the uncle's home. Well, we don't manage the community. That's not our role. So through a whole bunch of movements, and I think I had put it up here, I'm on the on a child welfare council. It's a CSEC task force group for the whole state of California. Through all of those movements, they're making changes, but what I tell people right now is we are with CSEC where we were with DV 25 years ago. Yeah, we're barely scratching the surface. So you talk about girls, there's a whole other boys, there's transgender, LGBTQ community. We're talking a lot of work to do. And it's like moving the Titanic. Yeah.
Are there adult survivors that are being used as mentors or therapists? Or
we specifically do use survivors. There's a couple of issues with survivors. We use 1 or 2 at any given time. The problem with survivors is it's hard to vet them because they have a criminal history and you can't really have them coming around group homes and facilities. Yeah, everybody here I can bet is probably fingerprint cleared with your work. So that's an issue. We managed to do it as a volunteer and they come in, but they're like side by side, so they never leave our site, not even to go to the restroom. So we'll walk them to the restroom. It's like escorting a prisoner, really. And so they come in and do groups. They will listen to a survivor 1 billion more times than they'll listen to a clinician. So that's why we have survivors in there, because they've walked the walk, they know what it feels like, they know they've been there, done that. So we do have survivors. It's just very hard to get them very integrated into the milieu of your program simply because we can't vet them. So they can't be full-time employees, they can't. So we're working on that as well with CCL and probation and trying to say, okay, how can we vet them? How can you, is there waivers that we can apply for? Which I think there should. The other issue, and this isn't always the case, is that these wounds are so deep that even if you're in adult survivorship, there's a lot of countertransference. Especially if you're walking into a facility for the first time and seeing girls who have walked that, are still walking the life. And so we've had situations where, survivors have come in and I'm like, not a great idea. We thought it was gonna be a wonderful idea, and it's like, yeah, you need to take care of your business because the girls are already having a hard enough time. Like, you need to deal with your own stuff. So we've had to say part ways. So something to be aware of always, that if you do get a survivor, always, how are you doing? Checking in, seeing how the girls are responding to her, and if the groups or the intervention becomes part of the survivor's recovery, then you know that maybe it's not a great match. So those are 2 things to be cognizant of.
In Orange County, there's Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, there's hotlines and things like that. Do you feel like those interventions have been helpful in identifying people, or is it kind of a
I don't have statistics on them. I know that it's all over the place. I had a staff the other day at the airport. She took a picture of the human trafficking sign. She's like, look what's at the airport now, which it wasn't before. Before you would see a whole bunch of foreign, labor trafficking posters. Now you have an actual CSEC poster at the airport. So the word's getting around. I don't know how frequently those lines are used. Information I don't have, but I would hope that they're being helpful. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, we're
Thank
out of
you.
time, so thank you so much.